please stand for the playing of our national anthem. Thank you, and you may be seated. Well, good afternoon, and welcome to our 2023 Fall Concert. Our opening selection was Americans We by Henry Fillmore and edited by Frederick Fennell. Henry Fillmore was born in Cincinnati, Ohio in 1881 and became one of the most respected march composers at a time when the march was the most popular music of the day. Americans We was written in 1928, but Mr. Fillmore had a hard time coming up with a name for the composition. It was first known as the Cincinnati Zoo, since that was the site of its first performance. Then, for some strange reason, it was called Pure Food and Health. Thankfully, when it was published in 1929, it was titled Americans We, and Mr. Fillmore dedicated this well-known march to all of us. We hope you enjoy the next hour or so as the Camden Community Concert Band presents Made in America. All of the selections on today's program are written or arranged by American composers and provide a sampling of some of the most popular songs in America spanning the last 100 years. We are the Camden Community Concert Band. The band is an all-volunteer organization comprised of musicians from all walks of life who live and work right here in Kershaw County and the surrounding communities. Some of our musicians are students, some are retired. We have teachers, business owners, engineers, computer technicians, and nurses, just to name a few. Some of our members are former band directors. Some played in college, and quite a few are simply former high school players that picked up their instruments after long years of disuse, cleaned them up, oiled the valves, and started trying to remember their scales and warm-up exercises. The one thing we all share is our love of music and our desire to serve the community. If that sounds like you, then please consider joining us. And Glenn said to let you know that if you're a clarinet player and you brought your instrument with you today, then we have room along this row over here, okay? The next selection on our program is a Leroy Anderson portrait arranged by James Barnes. Leroy Anderson was born in Cambridge, Massachusetts in 1908. He's probably best known for his winter classic Sleigh Ride, but many of his other tunes were huge hits, and I'm sure you will recognize at least one or two of the songs included in this arrangement. They are Serenata, The Syncopated Clock, Blue Tango, and Bugler's Holiday. Earlier, I failed to mention that the band is under the direction of Mr. Glenn Price. Mr. Price was a trombone player in the Camden High School Band back in, well, let's just say it was a long time ago. After graduation from East Carolina University, he returned to Kershaw County, where he became the director of bands at Lugoff-Elgin High School. Mr. Price recently retired and was quickly tricked into becoming our director. He won't tell you this, but he has received numerous honors over the course of his career. But as one of his former students, I can tell you his greatest qualification. Glenn has an infectious passion for music and the positive effect that it can have on the individual and on society, and we are indeed fortunate to have him as our director. Please join me in welcoming back to the podium Mr. Glenn Price as he leads the band in a Leroy Anderson portrait arranged by James Barnes. George Gershwin was born in Brooklyn, New York in 1898. He left school at the age of 15 to work for a publishing company as a song plugger on Tin Pan Alley. What's a song plugger, you may ask? Well, I'm going to tell you. In the early 20th century, before the quality and availability of recorded music allowed it to be a reliable marketing tool, song pluggers would sit at a piano in a department store or music store, or perhaps go around to theaters or saloons and play new sheet music so potential customers could hear a sample of the song. While he tried to sell other composers' published works, he began writing his own songs, and at the age of 17 sold his first piece. The title was, "When You Want 'Em, You Can't Get 'Em, When You Got 'Em, You Don't Want 'Em." And it sold for 50 cents. Now that's not 50 cents a copy. That was, he sold the rights to it for 50 cents. He had his first successful composition at the age of 20 when Al Jolson heard him play Swanee at a party and decided to sing it in one of his shows. Over the next 20 years, George and his brother Ira became one of the most popular and prolific music writing teams in popular music history. And there's a South Carolina connection with Gershwin. In 1934, George was invited by Charleston native DuBose Hayward to spend the summer with him on Folly Island. While there, the two of them collaborated to adapt Hayward's novel, Porgy, into the opera, Porgy and Bess. Although Warren Barker's medley does not include any of the songs from Porgy and Bess, I'm sure you'll enjoy and most likely remember these standards from the pen of George Gershwin. Our next offering is also a Warren Barker arrangement. Irving Berlin was not born in the United States. He was, in fact, born in the Russian Empire in 1888 and immigrated with his parents to New York in 1893 when he was just 5 years old. His career spanned 60 years and produced an estimated 1,500 songs. His awards include an Academy Award, a Grammy Award, and a Tony Award, as well as the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Journalist Walter Cronkite said of him, "He helped write the story of this country, capturing the best of who we are and the dreams that shape our lives." Like Gershwin, he started out as a song plugger, but as a singer, not a piano player. In fact, for much of his career, he could not read sheet music, and he was such a limited piano player that he could only play in the key of F sharp. His first song was titled "Marie from Sunny Italy," and it was published in 1906, and he made a whopping 33 cents from the sale. If you take inflation into consideration, it was probably comparable to Gershwin's first paycheck. In fact, George Gershwin called Irving Berlin the greatest songwriter that has ever lived. And composer George Kern concluded that Irving Berlin has no place in American music. He is American music. And who could be better to conduct this medley of American classics than the owner of American Patriot Coffee Company, Mr. Kevin Smith. Kevin is a graduate of Camden High School and the director of the Palmetto Homeschool Band. Please join me in welcoming to the podium Mr. Kevin Smith as he conducts the band in tribute to Irving Berlin, arranged by Warren Barker. Glenn Miller is the very definition of the small town boy who made good. He was born in Clarinda, Iowa, population 3,200, in 1904. In 1915, his family moved to the even smaller town of Grant City, Missouri, where he earned enough money milking cows to buy his first trombone, which he played in the town orchestra. During his senior year of high school, he formed a dance band with some of his classmates and made the decision to become a professional musician. In fact, he missed his own graduation ceremony because he had an out-of-town gig, but his mother gladly accepted the diploma for him. By 1926, he was touring with several bands, and for the next 11 years, he played, composed, and recorded with and for some of the best big bands of the day. In 1937, he formed his own band and began recording in 1938. From 1939 to 1942, that's 3 years, Glenn Miller and his orchestra had more than 100 songs on the Billboard charts. That included 16 at #1 and 69 in the top 10, more than Elvis or the Beatles. In 1942, Glenn enlisted in the U.S. Army Air Force and became Major Glenn Miller. He was assigned to the Army Specialist Corps, where, in addition to performing, he assigned and recruited musicians for the various musical groups that were a critical part of helping to maintain morale for the troops. During his service, he reshaped the military band from a strictly march-oriented ensemble to include popular and jazz arrangements, a legacy that continues to this day. In 1944, Major Miller boarded a flight from England to France so that he could finalize arrangements to move his band to the continent. He was never seen again. The plane went down over the English Channel due to unknown causes, and the plane and its occupants have never been recovered. Although his life was cut short at just 40 years old, Glenn Miller's left a lasting legacy through the compositions and recordings, as well as his influence on modern military music ensembles. Please welcome back to the podium Mr. Glenn Price as he conducts the band in the 1941 #1 hit, String of Pearls. This arrangement was done by one of our very own band members, Mr. Emmett Anglin. Our next selection is where we begin to take just a little bit of creative license with our title, Made in America. So far, all of our compositions have indeed been made by American composers. Although Irving Berlin was born in Russia, he became an American citizen when he emigrated with his parents. Best Broadway Marches was arranged by the well-respected American composer and director, James Christensen, and all but one of the marches were composed by American composers. The one exception is Consider Yourself from the musical Oliver, which was composed by Lionel Bart from London. However, Broadway is an American institution, so we feel justified in saying that the song was made famous in America. One other song in this arrangement has an interesting backstory. Hey Look Me Over was written by Cy Coleman and Carolyn Lee for the 1960 musical Wildcat, which starred Lucille Ball in her only Broadway appearance. At that time, she was arguably the biggest star in the world. The challenge, according to Coleman, was how to write music for a woman who had 5 good notes. Well, when you consider that Hey Look Me Over was later recorded by such notable musicians as Louis Armstrong, Judy Garland, Rosemary Clooney, and Bing Crosby, just to name a few, it would seem that Coleman and Lee found a way to make it work. For our next 2 selections, we turn the baton over to another of our band members. At this point, I should point out that Mr. Price does not hand over his baton to just anyone. Guest conductors don't just step up to the podium and wave their arms while the band plays something that Glenn has prepared them to play. All of these guest conductors have rehearsed the band on these pieces, so the musical interpretations, the dynamics, articulations, tempos, rallentandos are their own. So our guest conductors have to possess the skills to lead the band, not just keep a 4-beat pattern. As you will see, Mr. George Gray possesses those skills. When George isn't playing euphonium or French horn, he's a farmer over in Sumter County, where he settled after serving in the military. Please join me in welcoming Mr. George Gray as he conducts the band in James Christensen's arrangement of Best Broadway Marches. With over 160 million records sold worldwide, the piano man, Mr. Billy Joel, is one of the most successful solo artists in the world. He has written 33 top 40 hits, 3 of which reached the top of the charts. He's been inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and the Long Island Music Hall of Fame. He has released 13 albums, in addition to his 1985 Greatest Hits compilation album. In addition to his recording success, as of 2022, he remains one of the top 10 live performers in the world. Our next selection features 4 of his concert pieces: Moving Out, Piano Man, Only the Good Die Young, and Just the Way You Are, in a Warren Barker arrangement entitled Billy Joel in Concert. Thank you, George. This next medley is another arrangement that stretches, let me make sure I've got the right one, yes, that stretches our Made in America theme to include songs made famous in America. Johnstown, Pennsylvania native Paul Murtha, notice I did get the fact that the arranger is American, has arranged 14 of the top hits from the 1990s in the 90s, decade of music. And yes, I said 14. These songs were written by artists from all over the world: England, Germany, Mexico, Canada, South Africa, and America, just to name a few. What they all have in common is that they were some of the most popular hits in America during the 1990s. Coming to direct this piece is Paul Northern. Paul suggested that we play a little game of Name That Tune. So as you figure out what the song is, shout out the title of the song. And for extra bonus points, you can tell us where the writer of that song is from, okay? We do invite another of our members back to the podium. Please join me in welcoming one of our musicians from the Sumter area, an Army veteran and retired band director, Mr. Paul Northern, as the band presents Paul Murtha's arrangement of the 90s, Decade of Music. I heard a few of you calling out there. That's good. I didn't keep score, though, so I don't know who won. Before I introduce our last song, I did want to take just a moment to thank you for coming out. We love to play, but it's better if we have an audience, and so we're glad that you're doing your part. We are a volunteer group. We are a nonprofit group, so we're dependent upon donations to keep things moving. There is a box up here. We'd love to see you fill it up. It's an ambitious box there. But if you'd like to make a donation, there are envelopes in the programs, and of course you can drop some money in the box there too. But we appreciate your support. The most important thing you can do is spread the word, and when we have a concert, come out and listen to us. We're glad to have you here. We want to close out our time together this afternoon with a tribute to another icon of American popular music. James William Buffett was born on Christmas Day in 1946 in Pascagoula, Mississippi. As you may know, Jimmy passed away on September 1st of this year at the age of 76. There are tons of stories about Jimmy Buffett, but I'll share just a couple. While he was enrolled at Auburn University, he learned to play guitar from a fraternity brother so he could meet girls. He says he ended up leading the band because he was the only one in the group that either had enough sense or perhaps the work ethic to make sure the equipment was set up and they made it to the gigs on time. And I think that says a lot about his career and his success. Although his fans buy into the carefree, laid-back vibe of his songs, he was a workaholic who found release in his time on stage. The success of his music allowed him the opportunity to launch a number of other business ventures and charitable works. Jimmy Buffett's music, as a general rule, was not complicated and focused on telling stories. For that reason, it's pretty hard to find concert band arrangements of his songs. This brings up the other anecdote that I wanted to relate. While discussing the concert program with Mr. Price, he told me how hard it had been to find an arrangement and then how long it took to actually get the music delivered. We agreed that often an artist is much more popular and in demand after they have died than they were in their lifetime. That brought to mind a song that Jimmy wrote in 1973, before he had his first successful recording. It's titled Death of an Unpopular Poet, and I'd like to read it to you this afternoon. I once knew a poet who lived before his time. Me and his dog Spooner would listen while he'd rhyme. Words to make you happy, words to make you cry. Then one day the poet suddenly did die. He left behind a closet filled with verse and rhyme, and through some strange transaction, one was printed in the Times. And everybody's searching for the king of underground. Well, they found him down in Florida with a tombstone for a crown. Everybody knows a line from his book that cost $4.99. I wonder if he knows he's doing quite this fine. 'Cause his books are all bestsellers, and his poems were turned to song. They had his brother on a talk show, though they never got along. And now he's called immortal. Yes, he's even taught in school. They say he used his talents, a most proficient tool. But he left all of his royalties to Spooner, his old hound, growing old on steak and bacon in a doghouse 10 feet round. And everybody wonders, did he really lose his mind? No, he was just a poet who lived before his time. Of course, we know that Jimmy Buffett was well loved and appreciated during his lifetime, and he will be missed. But maybe in 1973, facing an uncertain future, he felt that this song might be prophetic. I'm so glad that he was able to enjoy his success and that we were able to tag along for the ride. So, let's change our attitudes, even if we can't change our latitudes, and have a cheeseburger in memory of Jimmy in Margaritaville.